So let's talk about the ending. It was a heck of an ending.
Oh, also,
It's pretty
also
crazy.
quick. For me, arguably, probably one of the weakest parts of the series, but that's just me. Anyway, I want to hear
Why?
your. Well, okay, I'll tell you why first, and then we can explore the rest. But primarily, like the main reason, it's simply because I felt a lack of satisfaction watching the ending, and specifically from one character, which obviously is Veb or Bev. So for all the bad things that she did, for all the racist things that she did against the sheriff, which by the way we need to talk about the sheriff because the sheriff was amazing too. But for all the things that she did all together throughout the show and how many lives she ruined, there was almost next to no payoff to her ending just because people who went through okay, people lived their lives in a far more kind way than Bev did, and yet they ended up in the same way that she did. And I don't think for a show that deals with religion in payout at the end because of what a good life you've led and all this shit. I think that for them to end this way, where like no matter what you did, you're gonna receive the same ending as everybody else. I was not okay with that. I was actually quite dissatisfied with that idea. I wanted Bev to
Interesting.
be the end all be all of suffering in that show near the end, and about the only satisfying thing of her in her arc about her ending is that you really do realize what a coward she is at heart
Mm.
when the sunrise is coming and she starts to dig into the sand trying to hide from the sunlight, and then finally obviously not being able to help it, she just bursts into flames. Guess what? There were kids on that island that had the exact same ending. There's no way that they deserve that ending. So that is not a reasonable ending for me. For her, for her
Yeah.
character. I just wanted more.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's funny. It's funny you say that because I would argue they they did have a different ending. That her ending was different. And it was reflective of who she was and how she lived. And the rest of the community died in a very different way, reflective of how they were and how they had lived before all this madness had happened.
You mean almost
Um,
at peace, right?
right, exactly. So Riley's mom and dad, they find each other. You know, Riley's dad dies in the church. Annie, his mom, cuts her own throat
Mm-hmm.
in front of Bev to buy time for the others to escape the house. They leave the church and escape. And the one bit of comic relief in the entire show is when Aaron kills Bev.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, they're all hiding in the back because again, Bev wants this, so she says. But when the massacre is happening, even though she knows she's safe, she'll come back to
The
life.
coward that
That's not
she
how she
is.
wants to
Yeah.
go. She's so cowardly that she hides. And then she even tries to convince them not to kill her when she's confronting the people who didn't take the communion and who weren't going to stick around to be vampires. She sticks around and tries to convince them not to kill her. And she says, "Oh, what will it buy you?
5 minutes.
Minutes?
It just means I'm 5 minutes behind. I love that
I'm
line
just
so
5 minutes
much.
behind you." Yeah, so good. And then Aaron just shoots her, and she says, "We have 5 minutes." And I think that's great. That was so funny. I watched it with my family. We all laughed when that happened. But so Annie wakes up and the father wakes up. Neither one of them gives into the bloodlust.
Right.
Neither one of them hunts. They don't, because they're horrified at what happens. They see what happens and they're horrified. And I think fundamentally, you really see who people are, right? You see who the zealots are. You see who the sheep are. You see who the really kind-hearted, good people are. And you see that Riley's family, through and through Riley's sacrifice and through the way his parents and younger brother behave, they are good people. They don't want any part of this. And they meet and they have this is what actually hit me quite hard. You'll talk about the sheriff whose ending hit you quite hard, but this hit me quite hard. You know, I don't have children, but I do have a wife. And the way that they faced the end together I thought was really beautiful, and that is what I would want after I killed all the vampires on Earth. After I did my hunt. But most of the community. Okay, so what happens? We got to take it back a little bit. So what happens is Bev comes back after the massacre on the island. She burns the whole island, convinced that the church will be fine because it was in like the 1980s when there was a fire on the island. It was the only thing that was unburnt, and she thinks it's Revelations. There's also the rec center. Sturge tried to save someone who Bev said wasn't deserving of being saved. Sturge, being such a follower, once Bev is like, no, he can't come. Sorry. So he says, okay, sorry, Jim. You gotta go. Yeah. But Pruitt says, no, we're all together in this, or what was the point? Right? This is an act of God or it isn't, kind of thing. Insinuating that Bev is not acting godly. But of course, his daughter is in the church. His daughter that he had with Mildred is in the church.
Sarah.
And she's trying to burn it down. Sarah. Okay, yeah, you looked up the name. Yeah, so Sarah's trying to burn it down. And he finally sees, he says, good. You know, like, I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of you. You are the best part of me. You know, you are the good that has left me, kind of thing. That's the impression I got from it. And then Sturge shoots her and she dies. He tries to save her. He tries to give her his blood. She spits it out. She is the good. She is the love. The real love. Not an evil called love, but she is the real love. She spits it out. She would rather die than become whatever everyone else has become. And she dies. And then as Pruitt leaves the church, Mildred knocks a candle over, igniting the oil that Sarah was spreading. And the church goes up in flames. So now they have the rec center. Well, it turns out the sheriff and Aaron are in the rec center. They're about to burn it down. Sheriff gets shot twice, I think, in the leg and then in the stomach, I believe. And Bev is super racist to him. It's really the first openly racist comments that she makes.
I think the other indication,
it's very like microaggression.
Yeah, exactly. The other indication is when they're in the school, like the two times that they battle each other in the school meetings, right? At the beginning on the first episode, they have that meeting when they're talking about the storm, and she's just basically being super condescending to the sheriff, saying, oh, well, you wouldn't know this, you're not expected to know this, but this is where everyone meets, blah 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 blah. And you also wouldn't know about this, but this is what we do in the church, but whatever. So the sheriff is like,
you know if you didn't go to the mosque on Sunday, to which he replies like, Friday. We go on Friday,
right? And she's like,
she says, oh, good, you can come.
Unless you're about to get on a ferry to go to a mosque for protection, you're going to have to bunker down here with us. And the sheriff is just like, okay, then. So that's another thing, like the other confrontation that they have in school. But I want to kind of, when I talk about the sheriff, I'll talk about all this stuff. So you can go ahead.
Yeah. So that burns down. The sheriff's son ends up finishing the job and burning down the rec center. Everyone suddenly is kind of awoken from their stupor. Their hunger is satiated. You know, they're not hangry anymore. And suddenly they're like, whoa, we did a bad thing here. This is not good. And we're all going to die. I love that Sturge went to the young altar boy. I don't know what their relation was, but Sturge went to him and he said, are you okay, kid? And the kid goes like, I think I killed my mother tonight.
Yeah.
You know, and that was really heartbreaking. And Sturge just goes like, yeah, I did some bad stuff too. And they all kind of just wander off together, unsure what to do. And Annie and her husband, they find each other, and, you know, they're deeply Catholic. They find solace in their faith, and they sing a hymn, like her favorite hymn, I'm assuming. And everybody goes to join them, and everybody realizes like what an awful thing has happened. And everyone is suddenly like at peace with dying because they know what they are. They know that they're killers. Like, this is not a holy thing, right? That they've allowed to happen. So everyone is at peace, or as much peace, or they're trying to be at peace with what's happening. You know, they did an awful thing and now they're going to face the consequences of it. They're going to die, and they're at peace, and they're all together, and they sing the hymn together. And I love how the sun rises and it hits the people in the back who aren't in the shade, the immediate shade of the trees. And then the fire just kind of cascades down as they all start to turn on fire. And it's Annie and her husband. I don't know the dad's name. Annie and her husband are the last two to be burnt. And I thought, I'm going to look for the name now because it's bothering me. But they're the last two to die in that situation. The priest, Pruitt and Mildred, they go to Sarah's favorite spot when she was a little girl, this bridge that overlooks kind of like a little river that goes to the ocean. That's where they died. They're at peace. They're together as a family, and they're going to do the natural thing and die together as a family. So in a way, the priest kind of gets what he wants. He doesn't get a lifetime with them, but he has the peace of their death together. Mm-hmm. They're together in the end. So he has some sort of peace there. Bev. So here's why I think Bev's death is actually very good. And it's very like biblical. And I think if you kind of have an understanding of like modern theology as regards to hell and what hell is supposed to be like, or what they say it's like now, it kind of makes a lot more sense and it feels a little bit better. It doesn't feel better if you want, Dante's Inferno and you want the 7 levels of hell,
which I did.
Prodded by demons.
I wanted Old Testament
in the burning lava pit and all that stuff.
I wanted
right?
Old Testament, yeah.
Sure, yeah, right, yeah. So it's not quite like that. So in modern theology, basically what everyone says is hell is living without God. It's like, or dying, or being without God, being separate from God. And it's a place that we put ourselves. We do things and we hold things to ourselves that separate us. God is all forgiving. God loves everyone, even the worst among us. God forgives everyone, but we don't forgive ourselves, and we do things that put us out of, they say out of communion with God. And so Bev is like the perfect example of this. Bev lived a very lonely, petty, fearful existence. Her faith was completely unfounded. She had no faith. She lacked faith completely, but she proclaimed it the loudest. She said she was so loud in proclaiming a faith that she didn't have. She was like, I am the most Catholic. I know everything about it. He's wearing the wrong robe. You're living the wrong life. You shouldn't be at the mosque. This is a miracle. This. I am a conduit of God. But she knows the whole time she's not any of those things. And you see it when Riley is turned to be the first one. He is the first apostle. He is Peter to Pruitt's Jesus. She is so deeply jealous. Mm-hmm. She is so jealous that she's like, I don't understand why God would choose that. Why would the angel choose that? So she's, not only does she not have faith, but she's like, God is making the wrong decisions by not choosing me. Why doesn't he choose me? And you can just see like internally, she's like, it should be me. Why don't I feel God's presence? Why don't I do this? Why don't I do that? It's because she's so awful. The evil we do to others, we do to ourselves. The evil we do to others makes us unhappy as much as it makes others unhappy. And so Bev's ending, Bev is alone. Bev doesn't have the solace of the community. Bev has no peace. She pretends to right into the last moment where she claws and digs for 5 more minutes of life because she doesn't believe. She doesn't believe the same way that everyone else believes. She has no peace. She dies as she lived, alone and afraid and angry, out of communion with God. And so she digs her pathetic little hole and she screams and she cries and that's how she dies. She burns. There's no boat with someone. There's no, Joe isn't on the boat to like lift her into heaven.
Right.
The same way that girl lifted Riley. Right.
Okay. So from a theologist's perspective, I think that you have a lot of merit to that explanation. Problem is that you just took literally like 5 minutes explaining the theologist, the theological, I guess, the theological side of why that ending is satisfying. But like, I don't care. She didn't suffer enough. Like, to me, you know what? Because again, coming from like an atheist perspective, right? Mm-hmm. It's not retribution. It's not the fucking whether you were alone or not. Like, everything comes down to your own actions. And as an atheist, I think one of the biggest things about atheism is really about justice. The justice that most people think they're going to get served after life, we know that doesn't exist, or we don't believe it exists, right? I see your smiles. Shut up. I know we don't know any. I know nothing is certain. I get that. But
Yeah.
Anyway, as atheists, what we want is justice in this life, because we don't believe there'll be another chance to actually have that justice. So that's my perspective. My perspective is this person made a lot of people suffer. My perspective is that she did not earn a place in heaven, which if it did exist, she wouldn't earn that place. But we don't get to have the satisfaction of knowing that, because we just don't think that that's what happens after. So it that's why I compared it to the deaths of the rest of the people in the village. Yeah, she was ostracized. She was not part of the community anymore. Big fucking deal. Like, like I said, kids that probably had no concept of why what was happening to them was happening to them. And there are kids in the church when the massacre is happening, actually.
Who get turned.
Yeah, who get turned at that point, and they have no concept. So why did they get the same agonizing, burning to death that Bev got? Like, why the equality at the last minute? That's what I didn't like. But again, it really does come from two different perspectives, and this is what's so interesting about the show, is that you can play it off from either side, really, and like still get to a conclusion that maybe amicable for you. But ultimately, I just wanted more pain out of her, right? And knowing that she did suffer, like, to me, like the little dig that she does in the sand at the end trying to hide was like the perfect representation of her personality. Someone who like had a super loud bark, but her bite was non-existent, and so she had no spine, no backbone, and ultimately she showed it, to the viewers, I guess, when she's trying to hide from the sun as it's coming up. So anyway, that part was excellent. But yeah, it's sure I can see how the theological aspect of it can be more satisfying, and I'll go with that because I really want to believe that she suffered through the end.
I would say, okay, take the theology out of it. We discussed a theory in another podcast that kind of freaked us both out. We got on like the Reddit horror stories or whatever about how, and Riley talks about it too. So you can take theology and God and everything out of it, right? And I know, of course, the ultimate like trump card that's very hard for a Christian apologist or any religious apologist to talk about is like suffering, particularly the suffering and deaths of children. Like, why suffer? Why doesn't God reach down and pick them up and heal them? And the sheriff has, I think you'll probably talk about it. The sheriff,
that's exactly right.
And actually, that is exactly how I felt when he said that. I thought that was the most impressive contribution that the sheriff makes in the entire show. Yep. And I thought it was so good and totally in line with what I believe. But take the theology, take the religion out of it. Hopefully, of course, children are born to abusive parents and stuff like that. But hopefully, as those kids died, they were with their family members, or they were with someone who was showing them love, giving them love,
comforting them.
Yeah. Annie and her husband, they died in love, looking at each other, holding each other, kissing each other, singing with each other. Everyone died in love, right? Additionally, all those people had a much better life. They lived a life. They had 40, 50, 60 years, 30, 20 years, whatever it was, 15 years of a better life than Bev did, right? Because Bev doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like, obviously Bev's parents or her mom or whatever were awful, right? Like, she grew up the way she grew up, and that's why she is the way that she is. So that's something to keep in mind too. So Bev, I don't know, are we going to say she's like mid 40s, 50s?
Yeah, probably like early 50s, I would say.
Yeah. I would say probably mid to late 40s or hard living. But so Bev had to live 40 years probably unloved by her family, all this stuff. So there's that as consolation. It's not justice maybe, but it's a small consolation that, those children, maybe they only lived 5 years, but they lived a better 5 years than Bev lived 50, say, right? Because they had love, hopefully. And everyone else did too. And so then you take Riley's discussion about death and how the dopamine release at the end.
Yeah.
Right? And how it floods your brain with memories and images. What do we think Bev's dopamine release is like? Does she have one? or is she so afraid that like the instinctual fear is taking over, and that's her existing memory, that is her resonance as she dies.
I think
Right? Riley was at peace,
that's a
right?
much more
And
satisfying
then
thing for me. Yeah.
combine that with the theory that we talked about a long time ago, how even though it's only a minute or 5 minutes, because of the nature of the experience and the rush of dopamine that occurs, the rush of adrenaline that occurs when your body dies, because it's just releasing everything. As Riley says, it's the last hurrah. So it's like, well, I don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
More than you've ever had in your entire life. And the theory being that the images that flood your mind can feel like an eternity, even if it's just 1 minute. So do we really think that Bev's final minutes, her brain activity, the finality of her existence, was an eternity of suffering? Especially if, because you know that she doesn't have the modern theological idea of hell. She has the burning lakes and fire of hell, the prodding devils of hell. So inside, we know, because of her lack of faith, that she herself, even though she'd never admit it, she is thinking, I'm going to hell. I killed people. I was such a part of this. It all fell apart. I was a bad person. I'm going to hell. And so her final thoughts and her final images are, I'm dying. I'm going to hell. I have no chance to redeem myself. I question God. I don't believe in God fully anyway. So her mind is going to flood. It's going to be Dante's Inferno. So she'll have 5 minutes that feels like an eternity of hellfire. So I think maybe if you look at it from that perspective, the ending feels a little bit better. Because I totally understand like the desire for justice. So powerful.
What a wonderful thing they did too. This is another thing you were talking about, removing the theological aspect of it, right? And then concentrate on purely the scientific quote unquote explanation that Riley gives. But they actually do that throughout the show, and they do it so well. It's almost like I said, I think the show really does try to bring both camps, the non-religious and the religious camps, together in almost like a weird unison, so that the show can perform and be told better. Because there's also a part in, I don't know, when they finally figure out, when Riley dies, right? He goes missing, and they're trying to figure out what is happening. Oh no, it's actually after he dies, and Erin goes to talk to the doctor, and she is like, this weird crazy shit happened, you're not gonna believe it, right? And the doctor is like, you're right, it's crazy, it's fucking intense, it's stupid. I wouldn't believe it if it wasn't for the fact that I saw blood do this, which is like, the blood bursts in fire when it's exposed to UV light. And then the doctor, Sarah, she goes on to give an explanation of what could potentially be scientifically, right? And so it's like at that point when I saw that, I was like, man, they can't just have the religious aspect to it. There's got to be an explanation scientifically, right? That was my thought before that scene. It was almost like an episode before that scene actually came about. And then that happens, and the doctor starts to talk about a potential virus that has very, regenerative qualities to itself, and like it heals people, but it has a very strong aversion to light, and blah 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 blah. And when she started to go into that speech, I was like, this is what I was looking for. Because to me, I actually, after I heard that, I almost put every subsequent thing that came in the show under that scientific explanation, instead of just leaving it in the religious aspect. So I saw the priest also, what an irony that the priest is the one that drives the religious aspect. His daughter, the person who is in a gay relationship, is the one that drives the scientific aspect of it, right? And yet they're both intertwined with each other, right? Very much as how you have said before, that science and religion are not exclusive. They're not against each other. They're actually one and the same. I felt like the message that they try to convey in the show with that was very much the same. The scientific aspect and the religious aspect just happen to be related to each other. They just one side just doesn't know it, and they run almost blindly in parallel to the religious aspect of it, which is just such a great fucking combination. Is one of the reasons why I really appreciated this show, because they just do such a good job at marrying those two aspects without hitting you in the face with it. You know what I mean? It's not overt. It's
Very
just
subtle.
Is.
Yeah. So subtle that you saying this, I'm like, oh yeah, they did do that.
Yeah.
You know, and of course I obviously picked up on it, right? Like I obviously made all these connections, but you saying it, I'm like, oh, they did do that. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah. So let's move on from Bev. Let's move on from the worst characters to one of the best ones. The sheriff.
So underutilized.
Yeah, very. Of course, I love the actor Rahul Kohli, I think his name is. I love the actor. I think he's so good. He was really good in Bly Manor. I love him in whatever I see him in. He had very little screen time for kind of how important he was, and Islam is explored a little bit on a very surface level, which I think is probably good, especially for an American audience and a Christian civilization audience. Yeah. You know, I obviously this is kind of my shtick, and I studied it in university and stuff. So for me, it was very surface level. But I saw a lot of people on Twitter talk about how, oh, I ordered a Quran. I'm so interested in Islam now. I want to learn more about it.
After watching the show, yeah.
After watching the show, right, because of his performance and because of the inclusion of Islam in this and the conflict between Islam and Christianity, and as his son sees these miracles, and there's that conflict there. So we alluded to this quote earlier, but Chris, do you want to talk about that conflict, the miracles of God as the son understood it versus how the father understood the presence of God?
Well, I won't take it. I will just take it from the character itself. Because I think to me that was the important part about the sheriff is not even necessarily, they do give you a little bit of his background, and that plays a lot into the reasons as to why he is in the island. He was, mistreated by I think it was very the NYPD, powerful. I think it was. And after 9/11, like the racism that he experienced in the force and all of that. And he's basically just like in this island because he couldn't put up with any of that anymore. He couldn't advance anywhere else. So he chose this for himself and his son. His wife has died of pancreatic cancer is what it is. And so anyway, he's very painful. He's very protective of his son, but at the same time, he is open to his son learning things. There's a part in this show where they start to have this conflict because the son wants to have a more normal life, fit in with everybody else, but he's kind of an outcast automatically because he is the sheriff's son. So the kids don't want to have him along because, they're looking to get into trouble. They're looking to smoke weed. They're looking to do all these things. And they don't want to have like the narc, quote unquote, in the group. So the kid does face some ostracizing from that side just because it's something that's completely out of his control. But then eventually he starts to assimilate into the community, and he starts to realize that he wants to learn more about the Catholic aspect of the island, the religion. And so he asks his dad, can I go to church? Can I go to church one day? And the dad reluctantly accepts. They're both Muslim. I think the patience that the dad has with the kid, but on top of that, the level of care that he has for his son, they're just so representative of the parenting style that I strive to have every day, that this character in particular just fucking resonated with me so much because of the parent aspect, right? So anyway, the sheriff does seem to, he has less screen time than most of the characters, but the time that he does have is actually quite powerful. He is one of the key pieces at the end that allows both Sarah to burn down the church and for his son to finish up burning the rec center, right? So anyway, excellent character, very well developed. He has a beautiful, beautiful moment in his arc when he finds a Bible in his son's backpack, right? And so after that, I guess basically a school assembly is called, right? And of course, it's such a small community that only a very few people are in the assembly, but Bev is one of those people. So Bev is basically trying to justify passing out Bibles in school, a public school, And the sheriff obviously has a problem with it because it is a public school. And this is where he basically schools, no pun intended, schools Bev on why it's not okay to pass out religious material in a public school. He's basically saying, oh, you know what? I am, they're in the school classroom, and he's like, well, you wouldn't appreciate it if I came to tell you that in Islam, we also believe in Jesus, but we don't believe that he's the end all be all of prophets. He's just one of God's prophets, but he's not God. We also believe that, people took the message of God and turned it and distorted and turn it into something else. We believe that the Quran is the final, unaltered, never to be altered message from God handed down to us. And Bev goes, I don't think this is a conversation that we need to have right now. You don't need to be indoctrinizing people. And he's like, that is exactly my point. You just made my point for me. We are in a school classroom. You don't want to learn about this. I don't want you telling my kid about this in school. And everybody's just like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. And yet somehow Bev still gets away with it because she gets interrupted. And then anyway, the story goes on, but it's such a good rhetoric that he's got with Bev at that point. And it really does shine into the hypocrisy of one religion and versus the other. Right. So, at the end, as you mentioned already, he gets shot when they're trying to burn down the rec center. And after he gets shot, his son, already turned into a vampire, is the one that comes in and basically takes the matches and throws them into the rec center and burns it down. So after that, the sheriff and his son, they just basically go off walking on their own. And I was very curious as to what was going to happen at this point, because the last thing I wanted as a dad watching the show, the last thing I wanted was for the sheriff to see his son burst into flames in front of him for something that, that was simple curiosity. Essentially, it would have scarred him for the rest of his short life to know that he allowed his son to go to church, get turned, all this shit happens to him, and then his son dies in front of him. Like I was praying almost literally that wasn't the case. So the scene goes, the dad, the sheriff and his son, they walk into the beach, they go to the shoreline, and they basically kneel down and pray as Muslims. They start their, they turn towards Mecca and just essentially do one final prayer together as Muslims. And after that, you just see them from behind, and it's such a powerful scene. You see them from behind, and the sheriff, as he bends over to put his forehead on the ground and then tries to get back up, he just doesn't get up anymore. He's just bent over and ultimately falls to the side and dies. He dies literally seconds before his son bursts into flames. So, opposite to what I thought Bev's ending was too soft, I thought the sheriff's ending was merciful, in the sense that he died with his son by his side, true to his religion, and he died seeing his son at peace while they prayed. And that was it. That's all he knew. He never got to see what happened to his son after, right? And even though the son goes peacefully, because I'm assuming he does, because he's made peace with his own religion again, he does fucking burst into flames. There's no two ways about it. And that's a horrific sight. So for the dad to be spared that view is a small favor that I thought was a gigantic gesture from a viewer's perspective. I cheered when he died before his son.
An actual miracle.
Thank you. That is exactly what I thought. That is an actual miracle that he did not get to see his son suffer a second time.
Yeah. And I really like you putting that into focus, because now I'm thinking like, Sheriff Hassan or Hassan, I don't know how it's pronounced. They always just call him Sheriff, or racistly Sharif. But I like that because he always acts as the foil to Bev, right?
Yes.
He's she is Catholic and doesn't have real faith. He is Muslim and has real faith. And so, yeah, he dies true to his faith, at peace. He couldn't save his son in the sense that he would love to save him, but their relationship was saved. You know, he didn't die with his son hating him. He died like reunited, and like, I'm sure it's all off screen, but I'm sure they would have talked. I'm sure, you know, they would have probably apologized to each other and said they loved each other and all of this
They would
stuff.
have been fine. Yeah.
They would have done all this. Yeah. And so he gets to die, you know, he goes to heaven. He gets to go with his son. He gets to go in peace. Don't believe in that. He gets that dopamine rush of him and his son and his wife and his life and the
In
love
a beautifully
that he had.
eternal time. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and he gets to spend eternity in that, his eternity in that. So that's great. The other thing I love is, you know, you bringing that up, and it just came to me when you were talking about that. You know, you were talking, I was like, that's a miracle. That's a real miracle.
Yeah.
That's what that is. You know, standing up from a wheelchair, that, you know, it would be a miracle, but it's comical, right? Like, it's over the top. That's not, and it wasn't real because it was just based on this like bad blood. But that's a true miracle. And I love that because that connects to something the sheriff says when he finds the Bible. The kid wants to go to mass. He really fights him on it. He's like, I don't want you to go. You're Muslim. And the kid says, well, I didn't have a choice in that. And Dad, there are miracles happening, you know? And that really annoys him. And I think what he said was so great, and it totally mimics my belief in miracles, that, you know, he sits down on the bed and he points to a picture of his wife, kid's mother, who he always has to kiss at night. I thought that was really cute.
Really funny.
and he says, do you know what pancreatic cancer does to someone? Do you want me to tell you?
Because I don't.
I never want you to know. I wish I didn't know. I carry that for the both of us. You don't know. You didn't see her when this was happening. And you know, pancreatic cancer is like terrible cancer. It's like colon cancer, stomach cancer. Those are some of like the worst cancers that you can get. Slow death, very painful. And he goes on to say that if you're telling me that the way God acts is to let a girl on the island walk while he kills a baby on the mainland with brain cancer, that's just not how God works. That's not God. And if that is God, I don't want anything to do with him. And I thought that was so perfect because, we have this idea that the miracles are it's like walking on water, turning water to wine, raising the dead, picking up the lame and curing them of their diseases and stuff like that. That's not what it's about. That's not, those things can be miraculous. I think it's okay to describe them that way. But the idea that God reaches down and is like, you're good. You're not. You're good. Here you go, guy.
Yeah.
All right. I'll fix you up. No problem. That's ridiculous, right? I do think that's ridiculous. And miracles are what we make. And the miracle for them is what they made, and it's their in their reunion. And I think that's really great.
Yeah, an absolute beauty of an ending for him. So satisfying. If it's like which one is the Shakespeare work where everyone dies? Is it Hamlet? Yeah, so this is like a Hamlet style ending because there isn't a single. Well, no, that's not true. The girl with the paralyzed girl, and the Riley's brother, they both survive. But everybody else on the island is basically gone by the time the sun hits. Yeah. But if they had to go, I am glad that their ending was a kind ending, in the sense that they really did resolve their eternity as a positive, positive thing. So, and
it seemed like everyone did except Bev, which I think also gives oomph to her death.
Yeah.
Of the 124 people, whoever that died on the metaphorical dying island, everyone literally dies. The whole thing literally dies up in smoke. They have peace. And then I think the altar boy and the girl in the wheelchair, whatever their names are. Lisa. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Oh, yes. Lisa. Yeah, right. They pronounce Lisa. Yeah. They escape on a rowboat 30 miles away. It was crazy to me that they take this rowboat out just in the middle of the night on the ocean, 30 miles from shore or whatever. That's just crazy to me. death wish, but they escape. They get off, and it's very like new Adam and Eve. It's very Mary and Joseph kind of thing, right? Like they're the new beginning for the island. They're the only ones left, and they see. And I think this is a good place to end. They see the vampire flop away. Starts to fly away. It's going west. It's trying to escape the sun. As the sun rises in the east, it's going west, trying to get away. Do you think the vampire dies?
All right. So a couple before we get to that point, I think we kind of like glossed over a few things that we really should establish for for everyone. People who are still listening. So after they burn down the rec center, the angel appears and kills Erin, attacks her, starts feeding on her, and Erin, as is being fed on, you kind of touched on this already, but yeah, the scene is actually quite powerful. So Erin, as she's being fed on, basically takes a knife and starts slicing holes in the creature's wings, right? And she is doing this because she's trying to make sure that the creature cannot fly away by the time that sun comes. So it's funny to see that scene in the sense that she is on the ground, she's being fed on, she's like poking the wings with the knife, and the vampire is just going ham on her. Like he's just eating. She cuts him once and he kind of like stirs a little bit, but no big deal. Just keeps on feeding, cuts him again, no big deal, cuts him again. He tries to push her arm down, but then she kind of brings him back down to her neck instead, so that he concentrates in eating and doesn't pay attention to the fact that she's literally slicing his wings open, right? So anyway, eventually I guess she is successful in tearing enough holes in his wings that by the time the beast tries to escape, he can still fly, but he's not effective at it. He can't go fast. There's a lot of holes in his wings. And so he's kind of just like flopping. And so the two kids on the boat 30 miles out see the creature fly away with difficulty. So at one, like the last line of the show, literally like the very last line is Lisa going, "I can't feel my legs." Now that could like that's kind of like not a throwaway line, but that is kind of confirmation to me that the creature died, and that the effect from the creature basically vanishes, which is why she cannot feel the miracle cure anymore, and she is no longer able to walk. There's another part on episode 5 after Riley dies. Pruitt actually says to Bev,
right,
he says Riley's gone, he's dead, and she says, "How do you know?" It's like, "I can just feel it. He's no longer there. I can no longer feel his energy." So it was a very instinctual. That's another thing that's also vampire lore. They do have this connection. Like, what is it? What do you say? The master and the sire.
Sire, yeah. Well, the
sire and the vampire.
I guess
the siree.
Yeah.
So they do have this connection where, like, if something happens to one, the other feels it, and so they were part of one unit, so to speak. And when one went away, the other one could feel it. That's why I think that in the end, when she says that, it's just because the creature died flying west, and then everything kind of resets to normal, which makes me think. It makes me wonder, if people had been able to survive somehow past sunset or sunrise, would they have turned back to normal?
I don't think so. I think
she had enough,
because
she had the most consumption of the sacrament out of anyone, because she was always in church. She had the most healing because she was able to walk again.
But she wasn't fully.
She wasn't fully turned.
Yeah.
But when Riley died, the others didn't die.
But once you're fully turned, you have a connection to your sire, and your sire has some sort of influence on you, can talk to you or whatever. But they were able to, in turn, turn other people, right? Like Sturge turns his friend, who never took communion.
Right.
So Sturge was a sire himself. So I don't think it would burn down.
Okay, so then
way.
It definitely like
and actually I can come up with like a theological argument for it. Going back, my thesis coming in handy.
Come on, Bell.
Donatist Church.
Come on, Bellman.
Schism. So, in Roman North Africa, in like about 300 to 425 AD kind of thing, there was the Donatist Church, which was a schism. The Donatists said, no, we're the real Catholics, you're not Catholic, you know. And basically the issue was around the sanctity of the sacrament of baptism. And during that time, there were Christian persecutions. And basically the argument was, some people stood firm and they died because of it. They were martyred, or they were imprisoned or tortured or whatever. Maybe they lived afterwards, but they didn't lie. And then there was another group called the Libellatici who got like a fake like vax passport, basically saying like, I made a pagan sacrifice to the emperor, I am not a Christian. And they would do fake ones, you know, and they were like, well, you know, their thinking was like, well, I'm not like, I'm omitting that I'm a Christian. I'm not actually doing a pagan sacrifice, so it's okay.
A lie by omission.
But the other people are like, no, you have to stand up for what you believe in. You have to be firm. And their argument was, if your bishop was weak, if he was a Libellatici, and he hid and he ran away, he's not a godly man. He gave up all power that he has. So if you were baptized by him, your baptism
you were no
doesn't
longer
count.
baptized.
Right. So you had to have like a hardcore OG bishop, right, who like baptized you. Now, the argument that won out with the Catholic Church was, humans are fallible. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to be afraid. They're going to do evil. They're going to do bad things. The sacrament is holy. It doesn't matter that the person performing the sacrament, it doesn't matter that they have gone to the wayside. It doesn't matter that they're a sinner, whatever, because the sacrament itself is handed down by God through Jesus, I guess. And that sacrament, once it's delivered, is fine. It's inviolable. Doesn't matter who gives it to you. It's inviolable. Right. And that's very relevant today as we uncover more and more in more and more countries, like abuse, right? Who wants to be baptized by an abuser? Right. No one wants that. I was actually horrified by the idea of that when I converted. I was like, oh my God, what if? But yeah, so the argument is it doesn't matter. Their sin doesn't affect you. It doesn't make you less Catholic. It doesn't make the ceremony less holy. Like, the ceremony is a ceremony. The sacrament is a sacrament. It doesn't matter who gives it to you.
Okay.
They're kind of inconsequential. So I think through that, the sacrament is what's important. It doesn't matter that like the original sire dies or whatever. The sacrament, the baptism,
like, you're still turned.
The unbaptism, still turned. So like, now you're just an orphan, right? Instead, you don't have a dad anymore. You're just an orphan now.
So based on that, then I think the ultimate thing is the creature does die. Like, there's no one. But that being said, in a world where one of those creatures existed, nothing says that another one couldn't. More. Right? It's not the only one.
And God knows what else. God knows what else.
Right. Yeah. There wasn't only one angel in God. I'm sure there were many. So I think that's as satisfying.
Who was his sire?
Who was his? Yeah, exactly. Where did he come from?
Right. How old is he?
Yeah.
You know?
Also, I don't understand. If you live long enough as a vampire, like let's say Father Pruitt, if he lived long enough, would he grow wings?
I was very curious about that too. I was like, are they like after 1,000 years, are they going to look like this handsome fella?
It is kind of a weird, it's a weird thought. We're never going to find out, but it's odd.
I think it has more to do with starvation. I think it has more to do with like the hunger. I know in like a lot of vampire lore, like if they're, because there's like a way to like trap them in their coffin, like you put like silver chains around it or something like that, so they can't escape. And they get like really hungry and they fade away to nothing. They're still alive, but they like fade away to this like monstrous form. Or the other thing in a lot of vampire lore is if they give completely into their bestial side, which it kind of seems like he did. Right. So you have like vampires. This is really popular in like Vampire the Masquerade and a lot of like, Warhammer and stuff like that. You have vampires and there's this feral hunger in all of them. And if they give themselves over completely to it, they become bestial.
Beastly. Yeah. So I think that's a possibility. Another possibility that I also think is that with enough time as a vampire, because vampires are apex predators, you evolve to have characteristics
Evolve.
that allow you to be that apex predator. That's why the angel flew around the island catching, like the drug dealer at first, or all the cats and
Right.
stuff like that. He had the ability to fly, and he might have developed that with enough time after 1,000 years just to better hone in his predatory skills. You know what I mean?
It makes sense in like an environment like the desert too,
That's
where
right.
you
That's
have great
exactly right. Yeah.
visibility. That's really interesting because then I wonder what these island people,
Like, what would they?
they would have been like fishy
What did
vampires.
they
Like they could go
evolve
to the
to?
ocean.
Yeah, I know.
That's pretty neat. That's a neat. That's for the sequel. I have one last theory that I'm going to take it to the
Yep.
top, and we can end it. We can end it there. My last theory, based on what you told me on the origins of this, none of this happened. It's just the girl reading that book from Hush.
That would be, yeah, that would, I think that would steal a lot from if they come out with episode 8 and it's like that girl reading the book. Oh God, that would be so disappointing.
Right. It's like a dream. It's like
Like a
it was all a
dream,
dream.
yeah.
Right?
Oh my God,
yeah.
that is so sad.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so yeah, that was far-fetched. But I kind of don't want to just end it there. I do want to do a couple of other things. Like, do you have time? Like, let's
Little
talk
bit.
about just a couple of things. So one
Sure.
is I am curious to know what the whole reasoning for having the priest run around in the storm was on the first episode. I don't know if that was actually the priest running around or if it was the beast.
I think it was the vampire.
It was the beast, right?
I think it was because he's so tall and lanky,
But what's
and
the-
also he's wearing like the hat and the.
But
jacket.
why dress up as the priest? Because literally what they say is Father Pruitt used to go out when he got confused, would leave in the middle of the storm and go and do that shit, or just go out and stand in the middle of the night outside dressed up like that. So why would the beast have to dress up like that? Is it just because he didn't have any other clothing and didn't want to be discovered?
Yeah, I think it's just like plausible deniability. Like if he gets seen, which he probably didn't assume he would, but if he gets seen, then it's like, oh, I saw some guy, or it's like it's kind of like an apparition to begin with, but it's like, oh, it's so weird. Like I saw Father Pruitt, but no one's going to believe it, right? It's like safe
He's all
to do, and so he's, and like you say, he's like an apex predator, right? So he's not just going to attack unthinkingly, stupidly. He takes his time and he really like surveys, and even to further that point, the person he first feeds on and kills, he picks the perfect one, and I don't think that's accidental. It's a stranger to the island, someone from the mainland, and like he knows that it's someone people don't like. They're not interested in they're not gonna follow up on that.
Also, dicey morals for a Catholic, right? Like he does, like a drug dealer.
Right.
He doesn't have the morals that people would agree with. Okay, so cool. I was always wondering about that. I didn't understand it, but now I'm kind of like more in line with that thought. So that's probably true. The last two things that I wanted to mention, kind of like plot holes, but not really. The lie that Riley catches the father with.
Right.
Let's just explore that super quick. Like probably the weakest plot line in the entire thing.
Show.
And it is such a catalyst for so many important events after. But so on their third AA meeting after Joe shows up, right? Is the fourth one, because on the third one Joe shows up, and on the fourth meeting Joe doesn't show up because he's already been killed by Father Paul, and so Riley gets to the rec center and he's wondering, it's like, oh, what's weird that Joe's not here, right? I mean, there's always a risk that he relapse, he's off somewhere like drinking, and so he's very worried about him. And when he communicates this to the priest is just like, oh no, he said he was gonna go see his sister. Now, prior to that comment, Joe actually confided in Riley that his sister had died, being off the island, and she didn't even want her remains brought back. So he says at one point, maybe I'll go pay her a visit because I didn't get to see her when she died. So Riley then hears this from the priest saying that, lying to him, saying that Joe told him that he was going to go see his sister. And then Riley takes that very offhand, plausible, absolutely possible comment, and it's like, wait a minute, something's wrong here. Like, that's a lie. Why is he lying to me? Like, look. First of all,
But it's like extreme too.
like
It's
an
like
extreme
it's not
reaction.
like, oh, weird. Why are you lying to me? It's like, oh my god, he murdered Joe kind of
What?
reaction.
What?
It's like,
You said
what?
so. So you said something super funny that was like he was about to go get laid, and instead he chose to pursue a very plausible, outcome or a plausible lie, I guess. So he goes back to the rec center to confront the father on this lie, and that's when he finds the beast, giving blood into putting the blood into the container, and then he gets attacked, he gets turned, etc. But it is such a weak spot. It is definitely like a weak line,
Super weak.
and it actually felt forced because as a rational human being, if I know this background from someone, right, and then let's say that you tell me, oh, this person just went to see their sister, my assumption, knowing that that person, the sister's dead, would not be like, especially knowing that he never got to see her again. My assumption would not be like, wait a minute, wait, you just lied to me because he went to see his sister. Yeah, it's plausible that he just went to see her at the grave. He went to see
Right.
her stone or something like that. Like,
It's just a turn of phrase,
yeah,
right?
it's
Like
just
he went
like,
to like, I'm gonna go visit mom,
yeah.
you go to the headstone or
But like
whatever.
he takes it so literally, and it does feel
Yeah.
super forced. Even when you're watching the show,
Yeah.
when I watched it the first time, I was like, that's kind of weird. Like, I don't think I would react like that to a plausible event. Like, he went off island to see someone. Okay, fine.
Yeah. And I think like they didn't really have to change anything. They almost didn't have to change anything. It could have just been on his mind. And he could have just been like, I wanna what? I'm gonna go talk to
Mm-hmm.
him and see what he meant by that. Like what? Or I'm just gonna confront him. I'm like, why did you lie to me? We're supposed to tell each other the truth in AA. And then you're like, you're lying to me? If he was indignant about that, that makes sense.
About the
But
lie, yeah.
not like, wait a minute, you're an axe murderer. Like
What
the
the priest says,
intensity of the suspicion is just crazy.
what the priest said, oh, he went to see his sister. What Riley heard, I am a fucking vampire. Please come catch me in the act. Like,
Right.
what?
Yeah, but I don't know. I guess you could argue it's like another miracle of our making, right?
All right.
Because without that, everyone's doomed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I-
but again, there's just so many. There's a million. It doesn't even take long. I don't know who approved that. It takes no time to be like, nope,
It was
that's not
it was
right.
an easy fix. It does feel very out of place.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll close with this, like a fancy fun fact that I actually, once I thought through it, I was like, oh yeah. But so the show itself is actually following with a lot of the lore. They've used it to a very effective way to talk about the vampire and like what vampires do and all this shit. So of course, when they stick to the lore so heavily, you would think that, for example, when they're burned by sunlight, right? Okay, well that's part of the lore. Um, Another big part of the lore is that vampires can't see themselves in mirrors. And so there are several shots, and I actually think it's almost done intentionally. There's several shots in the show where there are mirrors that characters can see themselves on even after turn. Like there's one part with the priest after he's turned where he can see himself in a mirror, etc. And so I saw someone on Twitter going like, like vampires can't see themselves in the mirrors. I'm like, and I was like, I guess that kind of does make sense. Then a comment below was like, well, actually, the reason why vampires of old, yeah, adjusted their glasses.
Well,
Actually, so the reason why vampires of old can't see themselves in mirrors is because one of their weaknesses is silver. And back in the day, when mirrors were made, they were made with a very thin layer of silver to use as the reflection. So they could not see themselves because the silver was there. So that was one of their weaknesses. Nowadays, they don't use silver in mirrors anymore. They just use the reflective surface, the glass. So it makes sense that vampires will be able to see themselves on
sense.
mirrors if there's no silver in them. And
That is a great pickup.
right, I read that and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So
I would be super impressed if Flanagan came out and was like, "Yep, that's why," and
like confirmed.
and like could back it
Yeah.
up. Like, yeah, he could back it up and not just like, I read that theory too. Like if he really knew that, whoa, I would be super impressed. It's funny though. The other the crosses. crosses don't seem, they pick and choose the
Right.
lore, obviously,
Yeah,
and the
they're
lore is
not
all
sticking
made
to
up,
it. They
right?
don't stick to it. Yeah.
Yeah, so they pick and choose. But even like I can't remember. They definitely used crosses in Dracula the novel, but in the recent TV
Mhm.
show, British TV show on Netflix, Dracula, they think it's the cross that bothers Dracula, but actually his cross, they mistake it. His cross reflects the sun onto Dracula, and he reacts to that because it's a metal cross, right? So it reflects the sun. But the protagonist, they think like, oh, he's reacting to the cross itself. The cross itself burned him, but actually the cross is meaningless. And
I mean,
that makes sense to me. Like to keep the cross thing, actually to keep some of the vampire lore as it's established, it has to be very Christian, right? But like it doesn't, obviously the type of religious you are wouldn't matter to the like there's nothing like inherent about the cross, right?
No, but
that would hurt a vampire.
but that
not like silver or not like garlic or whatever.
But that point is actually very, very important too, because it's not like the way I understand more modern vampire lore, more fleshed out vampire lore, is that it's not the object. Like a vampire is not going to be afraid of whatever Muslims use to idolize their god, or he's not going to be afraid of all the religions' different objects. What he is afraid of is the faith put behind that object. So for a Catholic, they put their faith in the cross, the sanctity of it, and that's what really empowers the symbol to actually repel the vampire. So it's, even in that context, if you're a priest, obviously your faith is behind the symbol that you idolize. So even if you do get turned, it's not like that is going to scare you. You're not at odds with God. You are actually very in tune with him. So that would have zero effect on you. In fact, that would aid in your conquest, right? So I kind of see it from that perspective as like, it's the faith that you put behind something that really has the effect. And that kind of helps me reconciliate those points where like, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. The mirror thing is pretty good.
The mirror thing was awesome.
Fine.
Overall, the fucking show is phenomenal. Like it's so good. Yeah. If he continues to pump out this kind of like quality like storytelling, man, I am so excited to see the next thing that he's gonna do. I just know that it's gonna be good. It's one of those things where like I just automatically like save time for it and I'll just watch it regardless, right? Haunting on Hill House was excellent. Bly Manor was great. Hush is a great movie. Gerald's Game is a great movie. So Flanagan is definitely coming up as one of those like great quote unquote horror people or directors that I really cannot get enough of. So an absolute masterpiece to me, this show. It's got so many qualities that resonated with me, especially the theme. So yeah, man, I'm just sitting here waiting for the next one.
Yeah, it was great. It was absolutely good. I've been like haunted by the final scene, like everyone together in the hymn. Like I wake up at like 6:30 in the morning or whatever, and I try and go back to sleep, and it's like it's just in my mind, and I can't get it out. Hopefully, it will go.
What you said? Someone in your family had nightmares?
My mom. Oh. Yeah, but funny enough, the first 2 episodes she had nightmares. Every subsequent one, she slept totally fine.
Yeah.
Like even the vampire reveal, all that stuff like did not bother her. But for some reason, the first 2 episodes did, and I wonder what it was that like really. Maybe it was the not knowing, it was the anticipation of something bad happening. Yeah. So that maybe that triggered her. Now my mom has nightmares anyway, like frequently. She has nightmares anyway, anxiety. Jeez. But yeah. So, but I was impressed that she didn't have any, because like I did. Vampire stuff is very hard for me to watch because the context of the blood, and everything is so gross to me. I find it extremely hard to watch. But I force myself through it anyway.
Nice.
Because I love to see a vampire die.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't?
All right. So as a last note, if you're still with us and listening, we will be holding a live discussion on Twitch after this episode airs. For those of you that maybe catch this after you've watched the show after we did, and you want to join the conversation there, by all means, please. We'll be announcing on Twitter when that stream is going to happen. So keep an eye on that. If you are not aware of our Twitter handles, Scampy, go ahead.
At Scampy Fox, and you can find me at Mr. Metroidvania, all one word.com.
Cool. And I am at sleepy_ghost1. Just find me under that on Twitter. Keep an eye on that. Follow. Make sure to hit follow and like all of my tweets because I have nothing but gold.
Smash that like button.
I had a really good tweet that I was proud of the other day and nobody liked it. And I was so sad. It was the Far Cry 6 thing.
That's good.
You didn't like it though. You got to go there and like it.
I did. It didn't come up on my timeline. Yeah, I'll go.
See, I have notifications
I'll
turned on for you, motherfucker. You don't have notifications turned on for me. How dare you?
Turn them all off. Turn off all my notifications.
You're missing gold.
I don't want anyone to at me, but I won't at back.
All right, Jordan. Anywhere else that we can find you?
Instagram at Scampy Fox, Twitch at Scampy Fox. You can find me everywhere at Scampy Fox, except for MrMetroidvania.com.
Cool. Same here. You can find me at Twitch, where I primarily stream, although I haven't done it in a while except yesterday. So just find me there. Twitch is at sleepy_ghost1. Same thing. And on YouTube, just do a search for Sleepy Ghost. I should be able to pop up right away because I'm a super unique individual. Nobody else has my username. So that's it. All right, man. Thank you very much
thanks for listening.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you, everybody else, for listening. And you got any questions, just hit us up on Twitter and we'll do our best to answer. Keep an eye out for that stream. It's coming soon.
Bye.
Bye.